From so-called business forums that try and extort money at construction sites to kidnapping syndicates and drug cartels, organised crime is taking many forms in this country. Recently, police and private security bust a syndicate that had been siphoning fuel from a main pipeline for years. Last week, Transnet suffered a train derailment, with threats apparently coming from a local group demanding jobs and payment. Last month, one of the biggest construction companies, Calgro M3, announced it was not taking on any new builds in KwaZulu-Natal after ongoing intimidation at some of its building sites. So, how can companies and state-owned entities protect themselves from these syndicates that threaten the economic growth we so desperately need? I'm joined now by Zaakir Mohamed, Head of Corporate Investigations and Forensics at law firm CMS SA. Mr. Mohamed, thank you so much for your time this evening. You know, if we look at what Shamila Batoy said in Parliament today, we have serious problems regarding organised crime in our country, and we're not winning the battle. Talk to me about the kind of environment that tends to grow these syndicates. Does it thrive in a vacuum where there's not enough police monitoring these situations, not enough infrastructure, not enough systems in place? Is that what it makes it conducive?
Absolutely. There's a whole host of factors. Some of these factors are the factors that you've mentioned, but I think for any crime and any commercial crime to thrive, you're looking at organizations that have weak controls and vulnerabilities that allow for crime syndicates to infiltrate these organizations and target them. And so it's very, very important that organizations place managing and mitigating the risk of commercial crime at the forefront of their decision-making, because the more difficult you make it for a crime syndicate to target your business, the less likely they're going to target your business. So it's usually vulnerabilities in your systems, in your controls, etc., that allows for this. So it is a whole host of factors, but when you're looking at organizations, it's weak control systems, it's vulnerabilities in the organizations that allow these syndicates to target them.
So, I mean, we're talking everything from, I suppose, cybercrime right up to someone walking onto a construction site saying, we are shutting you down unless you pay us. How can you protect yourself from the latter? You know, I can understand putting in strong cyber security, etc., on the one hand, but if you're dealing with direct threats on, say, a construction site, what can you do to protect yourself?
So one of the things you can do is obviously beefing up your physical security on site. And whenever we advise clients at CMS South Africa, what we tell our clients is understand the commercial crime risks that you face. And every organization has a different kind of business. And so they're going to have different kind of risks that their business faces. So in the scenario that you've mentioned, obviously that's a kind of business where, you know, a crime syndicate would target them by way of physical attacks and extortion and threats of violence. And when that does happen, there's a few things. One is obviously beefing up security. One is understanding that this is a risk that the business faces. What do we need as a business to do in order to mitigate that risk? Training employees on how to manage that risk. Having systems in place where when these threats are made, employees know they can easily and quickly escalate this within the organization so that they can be dealt with quickly. Then it's also getting the South African Police Service involved immediately when these threats are made. Understanding the nature of the threats and managing this risk quickly, so not wasting any time, taking these threats and looking at them with great importance so that you can deal with them effectively.
I mean, I can imagine that some companies might look at that because all of those measures you mentioned, they all have a financial implication. If you're going to high security to better protect your construction sites, you can understand why a group like Calgro has said, look, actually, it's just not worth it. We're not going to take on any new builds in this area. It's just not worth the hassle and the potential threat of violence. The other reaction, of course, might be, look, let's just pay the bribes and carry on. What would you say to companies considering those two perhaps easier options?
Yeah, I don't think you must go with the easier option, because if you're willing to pay the bribe, then obviously you are also contravening the law yourself, and you actually adding to the problem because you're allowing for this kind of behavior to continue. And so the better approach is to understand that so long as we give in to this kind of behavior, so long as these organized crime syndicates will perpetrate their crimes. And so we must say no. We must have strong ethical values within our organizations. We must have strong principles and systems in our organizations against this, because there is the starting point at which we can eradicate this. And I always say, when you're looking at commercial crime, there's two areas to look at. The one is the preventative, and the one is the reactive. The reactive is often more costly. When you've dealt with an incident of commercial crime, you have lost money, then there's money that you would need to spend investigating the particular incident. If there's any legal proceedings that you may want to institute or legal recourse that you may have, that all costs money. And so those costs escalate. But if you look at the cost of preventative measures, yes, it's a bit of a grudge expense, but it's money well worth spent, because you're ultimately protecting the underlying profitability and sustainability of your business. Because if an incident of commercial crime is significant enough, it could have a crippling effect on your business.
Give me an example of a proactive approach to dealing with a syndicate before they've even popped up and tried to do what they do.
So a proactive approach is looking at your business holistically, understanding that commercial crime is a risk that your business is going to face, knowing that your business has different business units. For example, you've got finance, you've got procurement, you've got sales, etc. Each of these business units will come with a different kind of commercial crime risk. Once you understand these various risks, you can then implement meaningful measures that will actually be effective in eradicating that risk. Then the next thing that organizations must do is be vigilant and conduct due diligence on their employees, on their suppliers, on their third-party business partners, so you know who it is that you're doing business with. Because remember, in any organization, your employee is your greatest asset, but at the same time, your employee can be your greatest risk, because they effectively could be a Trojan horse. If your employee is susceptible to receiving a bribe from a crime syndicate, that's the way they can infiltrate your organization, by handing over sensitive information or allowing fraudulent invoices to be passed through, or letting the crime syndicate know where the vulnerabilities in your business lie.
And
those are just some things.
And it's interesting because today in Parliament, Scopa was dealing with this issue of the vetting process, which clearly is a crucial part, making sure you've got the right employees, and that things are not moving quickly enough. The State Security Agency not doing what it should be doing quickly enough, according to Scopa. I wonder if you could quantify for us just how much of a commercial crime syndicate problem we have in this country. I mean, are we looking at a growing problem, or are we looking at a problem that's getting controlled now because we are seeing law enforcement beefing up, we are seeing more arrests?
So I think from my perspective, I think it is a growing risk that organizations face. And there's some interesting statistics that have been released around organized crime. Recently, in September this year, the global organized crime index was released. And in that crime index, South Africa was listed as 19th highest in the world for organized crime, which is quite a shocking statistic if you look at how many countries there are in the world. And this report also suggests that South Africa has one of the most illicit markets in the world. And so that is another shocking statistic that we find in that report. Then if we look at the Africa Organized Crime Index of 2021, South Africa in the African region was listed as the 5th highest when it comes to criminality, or its criminality score is 5th highest. And this was an increase from 2019, an increase of 0.47 on the criminality score. And so these statistics show that it is an actual growing problem. And so yes, while we are finding a lot more media reports around it, we are starting to see some more action being taken by our authorities. I think we've got a very, very long way to go before we can really say that we are eradicating and dealing with the problem. And I think this is because organized crime is so lucrative for organized criminals.
Gosh, that is shocking information indeed. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Much appreciated. Head of Corporate Investigations and Forensics, Zaakir Mohamed at law firm CMS SA.